Once upon a time, across a land of mountains and rivers and ancient temples, there lived people who had forgotten what it felt like to be free. They were called the Marathas, brave by nature, proud by blood. But for generations, they had lived under the shadow of empires that did not belong to them. Empires that took their land, their wealth, their dignity, and told them quietly but firmly that this was simply the way of the world. Most people believed it. Most people bowed their heads and continued living. But one boy refused. His name was Shivaji, and from the moment he understood what the word freedom meant, he decided he would spend his entire life fighting to give it back to his people. This is his story, not simply of battles won and forts captured, but of a man who dared to believe that ordinary people deserved to live with dignity and who refused to stop walking forward until they did. Shivaji was born in the year 1630 at Sahyadri Fort, high in the mountains of Maharashtra. His father, Shahji, was a respected general, a man of great ability. But Shahji served the very sultanates that oppressed his own people. He was away for most of Shivaji's childhood, fighting other men's battles, serving other men's thrones. And so the boy was raised largely by one person, his mother, Jijabai. She was not simply a mother, she was a teacher, a vision made human. Every night she would sit beside Shivaji and tell him stories, not invented tales, but the great stories of India, stories of Ram and Hanuman, of courage and sacrifice, of kings who chose righteousness over comfort, of warriors who stood alone when everyone else had already surrendered. She did not tell him these stories to entertain him. She told him these stories to shape him, because she believed with every part of herself that her son was meant for something greater, something the world had not yet seen. And Shivaji listened, not the way children listen to bedtime stories, but the way someone listens when they already know, deep inside, that what they are hearing is true. He grew up in the hills and forests near Pune, running across mountain paths, learning the shape of the land, every valley, every ridge, every hidden trail that wound between the great peaks of the Sahyadri mountains. He trained in sword fighting, in horse riding, in the art of moving quickly and disappearing before the enemy could respond. But more than strength, he developed something rarer, the ability to think, to observe, to understand a situation not just as it appeared on the surface, but as it truly was beneath. Most rulers of his time believed power came from the size of their armies, from the weight of their gold, from the fear they could place in the hearts of common people. Shivaji believed something different. He believed power came from purpose, from the trust of the people who followed you, from a cause worth fighting for. And his cause was clear: Swarajya, self-rule, a kingdom not of kings imposing their will from above, but of people living freely on their own land. By the time he was 16 years old, Shivaji had already begun, without an army, without permission, without waiting for anyone to tell him the time was right. He gathered a small group of young men from the hills around him, boys he had grown up with, boys who trusted him completely, and together they captured their first fort, not through overwhelming force, but through intelligence, through careful observation, through knowing exactly when to move and how. The fort was called Torna. It stood high above the surrounding land. It had been neglected. Its defenders were few and unprepared. And one morning, without warning, it belonged to the Marathas. Shivaji stood at its walls and looked out across the hills and valleys below. He was 16 years old, and he understood in that moment that what had just happened was only the beginning. The years that followed were years of building, not just capturing territory, but creating something that had never existed before in quite that way. A kingdom built on principles, Shivaji had strict rules for how his soldiers behaved, rules that surprised even his enemies. When a town was captured, the people living there were not to be harmed. Their homes were not to be touched. Their places of worship were not to be disturbed. Not a single one, not a temple, not a mosque, not a church. Shivaji understood something that many rulers of his era did not, that his fight was never against any religion. His fight was against oppression itself. He had Muslim commanders in his army, Muslim soldiers among his most loyal fighters, Muslim advisors in his court. He gave grants to maintain mosques within his kingdom. He honored saints and scholars of every faith, because he believed that a kingdom built on the hatred of one people toward another was no kingdom at all. It was simply a different kind of cage. And he had not fought for this long to simply build another cage. He had fought to build something worthy of being called Swarajya. His code of conduct for his soldiers was perhaps the strictest in all the land. Women of every captured territory were to be treated with complete respect. Any soldier who violated this rule was punished severely, without exception, without compromise. This was not common. In the wars of that era, women were often treated as the spoils of battle, as possessions to be claimed along with land and gold. Shivaji refused this absolutely. He had grown up watching his mother hold a kingdom together while his father was away. He had learned from a woman what courage truly looked like. He would not allow the women of any land, any religion, any background to be dishonored under his name. That was not Swarajya. That was simply conquest wearing a different mask. Word of this began to spread, slowly at first, then faster. Farmers in the hills heard about the young Maratha chief who would not let his soldiers harm them. Traders on the roads heard about a leader whose men did not steal. Women in captured towns heard that the army that had arrived was unlike any army they had encountered before. And something began to happen that gold and weapons alone cannot create. People began to believe in him, not because he forced them to, but because he had given them a reason to. He was building something real, something that belonged to them as much as it belonged to him. The great empires surrounding him took notice. The Adil Shahi Sultanate of Bijapur watched this young Maratha chief with growing unease. How had he captured so many forts so quickly? How had he won the loyalty of so many people? They decided to send their greatest general to crush him. His name was Afzal Khan, a man of enormous physical size, a man of fearsome reputation. He had destroyed temples to break the spirit of his enemies. He had swept through armies with terrifying force, and he was now marching toward Shivaji with an army many times the size of anything Shivaji could place in the field. Most people around Shivaji were afraid. Some urged him to surrender. Others suggested fleeing to the safety of distant hills. Shivaji did neither. He studied the situation carefully. He thought, he planned, and then he proposed something unexpected, a meeting. Just the two of them, outside the walls of Pratapgarh Fort, to speak, to negotiate, perhaps to find peace. Afzal Khan agreed, but Afzal Khan had no intention of peace. He arrived at that meeting with a hidden blade, intending to kill Shivaji under the cover of a handshake. What Afzal Khan did not know was that Shivaji had already understood this. He had read the situation not as it appeared on the surface, but as it truly was beneath. He arrived wearing armor beneath his robes. When Afzal Khan moved to strike, Shivaji was ready. In the struggle that followed, it was Afzal Khan who fell. The great army sent to destroy the Maratha dream fell into confusion, and the Marathas, waiting in the hills around them, swept forward. The battle was over before it had truly begun. Word spread across the Deccan like fire across dry grass. The young Maratha chief had faced the most feared general of Bijapur, and he had not simply survived. He had won, not through reckless bravery, but through calm intelligence, through the refusal to be deceived by appearances, through the understanding that preparation is the truest form of courage. More forts fell, more territory came under the saffron flag, but the great empires were not finished. Bijapur sent another army, then another. The Mughals, watching from the north, began to take notice. Aurangzeb, the Mughal emperor, was the most powerful ruler on the subcontinent. He controlled armies so vast they seemed to stretch to the horizon. He believed no regional chief could stand against him for long. He sent one of his most trusted generals, Shaista Khan, deep into Maratha territory. Shaista Khan captured Pune and settled into the city with his enormous army. He lived in the palace that had once been Shivaji's home. He believed, as many powerful men believe, that possession of a place means control of it. Shivaji waited. He watched. He thought. And then, in the middle of the night, he moved. With a small group of fighters, Shivaji slipped quietly into Pune under the cover of darkness. They moved through the streets that Shivaji had known since childhood. Every alley, every shadow, every way in and out. They reached the palace where Shaista Khan slept. What happened next became legend. Shaista Khan escaped through a window in such panic that he lost 2 fingers in the process. His guards were overwhelmed before they understood what was happening. His soldiers, scattered across a sleeping city, had no time to respond. By the time Pune woke to full alarm, Shivaji and his men had vanished back into the night. Shaista Khan left Maharashtra shortly afterward, deeply humiliated. The message had been delivered with absolute clarity. No army is large enough to protect a general from a man who knows the land, knows the darkness, and refuses to be afraid of either. Aurangzeb was furious. He sent another force, this time under his trusted general Jai Singh. And this time the campaign was more calculated. Fort after fort was put under siege. The Marathas were worn down. Resources grew thin. After months of fierce resistance, a treaty was negotiated. Shivaji agreed to travel to Agra, to stand before Aurangzeb himself, to acknowledge the emperor's authority. What awaited him in Agra was not respect, it was humiliation. In Aurangzeb's court, one of the most magnificent in the world, Shivaji was placed among minor nobles, men of far lesser standing, as if to say that he was nothing, that all he had built was nothing. Shivaji did not hide his feelings. He spoke openly about the insult, and for this, Aurangzeb placed him under house arrest. In Agra, far from Maharashtra, far from his people, surrounded by enemy territory. Many men in that position would have given up, would have accepted whatever terms were offered simply to survive. Shivaji did what Shivaji always did. He thought, he observed, he planned, and then, in a manner that has been told and retold for centuries since, he escaped. Some say he hid himself in a basket of sweets being delivered to holy men outside the city. Some say he disguised himself as a wandering ascetic. The exact details have blurred over time. But what is agreed upon is this. One of the most closely watched men in the most powerful empire in the world simply disappeared and made his way through hundreds of miles of enemy territory, all the way back to Maharashtra, back to his people, back to Swarajya. When he arrived home, something had shifted, not just in his circumstances, but in the hearts of everyone who heard what had happened. Here was a man who had been placed in the deepest cage the most powerful emperor in the world could build, and he had simply walked out of it. Not because he was superhuman, but because he refused, in every moment, to believe that the situation was beyond him, because he kept thinking when others would have given in to despair, because he kept moving when others would have stopped. In the years that followed, Shivaji rebuilt. He reorganized his army. He recaptured lost forts. He expanded his kingdom in every direction. He also did something that no Maratha ruler had attempted before. He built a navy. The Konkan coastline stretching along the western edge of his kingdom was long and exposed. The Portuguese sailed those waters. The Dutch, the British, pirates of every origin preyed on Maratha traders. Shivaji understood what many land-based rulers did not. That power without command of the sea is never truly complete. He built warships. He trained sailors. He constructed forts that rose directly from the ocean itself, fortresses of stone standing in the water, guarding the coastline from any direction. His naval commanders were drawn from different backgrounds, different communities, different faiths, because Shivaji chose people based on their ability, not on what family they were born into, not on which god they prayed to, on whether they could do what was needed. His kingdom grew, his reputation grew further still, and then came the moment that completed what he had been building his entire life. In the year 1674, on the 6th day of June, Shivaji was formally crowned. The ceremony took place at Torna Fort, a great flat-topped mountain rising above the surrounding hills, a place that seemed built by nature itself to hold a king. Priests and scholars gathered from across the land. Warriors stood in their finest armor. Common people climbed the mountain paths to witness what was happening. The title given to him was Chhatrapati, sovereign of sovereigns, the one whose canopy of authority extends over all. But what made that moment remarkable was not the title itself. It was what the title represented. For the first time in living memory, a Maratha king sat on a Maratha throne, not serving another empire, not bowing to another flag, but ruling openly and completely in the name of his own people. Swarajya was no longer just a dream. It was real. It had walls and courts and soldiers and laws. It had a king who had sacrificed everything for it, and people who believed in it. The great Mughal Empire had not been able to stop it. The Adil Shahi Sultanate had not been able to stop it. Nothing had been able to stop it, because it was built not on the ambition of one man, but on the dignity of an entire people. People who had been told for too long that they did not deserve to be free. Shivaji lived for 6 more years after his coronation. He continued building, continued fighting, continued governing with the same principles he had carried since his earliest days. He passed away on the 3rd of April, 1680, at Torna Fort. He was 50 years old. The empire he left behind would go on to challenge Mughal dominance across the entire subcontinent. The values he had lived by would inspire freedom fighters centuries later, people who had never met him, people who lived in a world he could not have imagined, but who recognized in his story something that does not age, something that does not belong to any one era or any one land. He treated farmers with the same dignity as generals. He protected women when no law required him to. He respected faiths that were not his own when hatred would have been far easier. He escaped cages that were supposed to be inescapable. And he kept building long after most men would have decided that enough had been done. That is the lesson this image carries. Not that great men never suffer, but that great men keep walking even when they do. Not that courage means feeling no fear, but that courage means continuing despite it. Not that Swarajya was easily won, but that it was worth every step of the long and difficult road. Shivaji Maharaj did not simply give his people a kingdom. He gave them back something they had nearly forgotten they deserved, the belief that they could determine their own fate, that their land, their families, their temples, their way of life were worth defending. That one person with an unbreakable purpose can change what everyone else believed was impossible. Centuries have passed since that coronation at Raigad. Centuries since that boy first looked out from the walls of Torna Fort. But the story does not fade. It does not belong to the past. Because somewhere right now, there is someone standing in the middle of circumstances that seem too large to overcome, surrounded by forces that seem too powerful to resist, being told, quietly or loudly, that the way things are is simply the way things must be. And if that person looks at this warrior walking through a field of broken things with open eyes and a straight back, they might remember something important. The situation is never as fixed as it appears. The enemy is never as powerful as fear makes it seem, and the path forward is always there, waiting for someone who refuses to stop looking for it. That is why Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj still speaks to us today, not as a statue, not as a legend too large to touch, but as a reminder of what an ordinary person can build when they carry an extraordinary purpose inside them and refuse, no matter what, to put it down.